In chapter 12, Stevens discusses contract verbs. Now, contract verbs are not any kind of special verbs in terms of function, but they are special in terms of recognition. Contract verbs are the type of verbs that have verb stems that end in short vowels, epsilon, omicron, or alpha vowels, such that when they interact or collude with inflections that have vowels as well, they contract or interact in such a way that the resultant form might change, and for sure in terms of its accent. They often contract and then show a circumflex accent rather than an acute accent. So a couple of changes that we can observe here. Stevens points out, first of all, that verbs normally have an acute accent only. In the case of contract verbs, you will see a circumflex accent. So when you see that, you most likely have a contract verb. Second, you no longer have the epsilon or omicron thematic vowel because they get absorbed into the resultant diphthong or long vowel. And then there's a couple of observations. Any alpha form will become an alpha contract. Any diphthong iota is originally the other vowel. Diphthong eta is an epsilon contract. Diphthong omicron upsilon is either epsilon or omicron contract. The first singular omega can be any of the three contracts, short vowels, and any other omega is alpha contract only. We can see this best summarized in the table right here, where on the left side you will see the short vowels that are possible at the end of a contract verb, epsilon, omicron, and alpha, and across the top the possible vowels or diphthongs that they might interact with when they come across a vowel ending, a verb inflection. There's a funky doggy here that's trying to interact with me here. Okay, so examples of verbs here that are commonly known contract verbs would be verbs like aiteo. And you see that if you take off the first person singular inflection, the omega, you will be left with a verb that ends in the short vowel epsilon. Same for siteo or kaleo. Examples of omicron verbs would be dikaio, or let's see which one you might know. Pleroo, I fulfill. Stauroo, I crucify. Examples of an alpha contract would be agapao or genao. So how does that work? Well, we have a good explanation here. Take, for example, phileo from I love. If you take off at first person singular, then the epsilon will collude if you would add it with the first person singular. So that gets swallowed up together. Look over here. If we get epsilon and omega, then the resultant form would be an omega form, the long vowel. And indeed, we see that here, right? The resultant form is a long vowel. Because a contraction has taken place, we get, instead of an accent that is an acute, we get a resultant circumflex. There it is. All right. So that's the idea there. And so this is only a matter of recognition, such that when you look at our normal primary endings, o, as, a, om, and eta, uzi, you now will start seeing circumflexes. And when you recognize that, you know that you have a contract verb. Now, for poeo, you would still be able to recognize it quite well. But when you look at pleroo, no longer do you see o, as, a, om, eta, uzi, because the second person singular and the third person singular look remarkably different. So you have to be able to trace that. Same for agapao. Look at that second person singular, agapas. But whoa, it has a circumflex, so you start to clue in and say, wait a minute. Something has happened here. It has a circumflex. I wonder if this is a contract verb. So if it is a contract verb and there is an alpha there resulting, let's see what happened. Oh, if it was an alpha, and it could very well be possible that if it was an alpha and it was a third person singular, or in this case a second person singular, o, as, a, that would have had an alpha, and look at that. That results into an alpha iota, a small superscript. And sure enough, that's there. It was still the final sigma of B. That's from agapao. And so that's how you will be able then to trace his lexical meaning. So that's what it all is about, so that you'll be able to figure out what the word means. Some other things in this chapter is a short section on cases for direct objects. Sometimes you simply just have to complete a thought. Some verbs you simply just scream for certain cases to follow, so that you can express the verse's direct object other than just the accusative. Just like in English we don't say, what are you afraid, but we say, what are you afraid of? You don't say, I never heard, but you say, I never heard of. So the same we do in Greek. The akoluthousin, his disciples follow, but they don't just follow, they follow him. So we call that object cases, with a genitive case and an accusative case. Just kind of completing the thought there. You do not believe in me. And notice it's in the dative, moi. You do not believe in him. And again, it's in the dative. We can do the same thing for the accusative case, and look, then it's atone and eme. It's in the accusative. So just completing that thought. Okay, it talks a little bit more about copulative verbs. We've already seen two copulative verbs, ginomai and emi. They're intransitive, so they do not take an object. We've just now seen something that took an object. Another one is hupargo, so that's often used as well, especially with possessives. And so here it is for our citizenship is in heaven. We have our citizenship in heaven. Greek also uses the historical present, where when you tell a story that you start talking about in the past tense, you can suddenly turn into the present just to draw in your audience. And so even though it still looks morphologically past tense, you would translate it into the present. Then this chapter has an item about the use of the negative. We are already familiar with u, or if we include a consonant uk or u, depending on what word follows, to be used as a negative. But Greek has a second negative, me, that you also use outside of the indicative mood. But for right now, it's important to know you can use this in a rhetorical session, such that if you ask a rhetorical question and you start that question with u, or uk in this case because a vowel follows, then the implied answer that's expected would be yes. Am I not an apostle? And when Paul writes that, he implies that the expected answer is yes. Had he used me, am I not an apostle, the implied answer would have been no. We see that here. Are we stronger than he? And the expected answer is no, because he uses me. Me is kerateroi, autu esmein. Greek also knows the double negative, an emphatic negation, ume, may it never be. So never, never, double never. If I told you, you would never believe. Ume, never, never, never. Of course, then there is the genitive, which we say of, the love of God. But in Greek, it's not always clear what that means. Is that the love that belongs to God? Or is that love that has God as an objective, like the love of God? So we call that a case of the objective genitive or the case of the subjective genitive. And we practice that in class. Okay? So if you have any more questions about that, let's talk about it in class, or send me an email and look that up. Pay attention here to further information about the vocab.